3 days before my son's promotion party, I drove down to the little tea room on Mercer Street to pick up the order I'd placed for the dessert tray. The owner, a woman I'd known since 1988, pulled me behind the counter and said, "Don't make a face. Just walk with me." I had no idea what she meant. She led me into the back pantry and closed the door behind us. Then I heard voices through the wall. Voices I knew. Voices I loved. And they were talking about putting me in a memory care unit by October. My knees nearly gave out. Before I go any further, I want to say I'm so glad you're here with me tonight. Wherever you're watching from, leave it in the comments. I read every single one. And please understand, some of what I'm about to share has been changed for privacy and storytelling. Names, certain places, but the bones of it, the parts that matter, those are mine. They happened. My name is, well, for tonight, call me what my late husband used to call me when the world got loud. He used to call me Birdie. So we'll go with that. I'm 68 years old. I live in a stone house at the top of a hill in Asheville, North Carolina. The kind of house that creaks when the weather changes and smells like cedar from the closets my husband built. My husband's name was Patrick. He died in 2011. I was 53. We'd been married 31 years. The tea room on Mercer is called the Velvet Spoon. Imogene has run it since the early 80s. She used to cater every single dinner party Patrick and I ever threw. She knew our anniversaries. She knew what kind of cake Patrick liked. Almond, with raspberry between the layers, no fondant. He hated fondant. When I walked in that Wednesday afternoon, the bell above the door made the same sound it had made for 40 years, and the air smelled like bergamot and warm butter, and I thought it was just another errand on a Wednesday. Imogene was behind the counter polishing a silver creamer. She looked up at me, and the polish cloth stopped moving. Her face. I'll never forget her face. It went the color of dishwater. "Birdie," she said very quietly, "come back here a second. I need to show you something in the pantry." I laughed. I actually laughed. I said, "Jeannie, I just need the tray. I've got to be back by 4. Bia's coming over to Birdie. Please." Something in her voice. I followed her. She walked me past the kitchen, past the cooler, into the dry goods pantry at the very back of the shop. She shut the door behind us and turned off the overhead light. There was a sliver of yellow light along the bottom of the door. She put one finger to her lips. I could hear voices on the other side of the wall. The pantry shared a wall with her private dining nook. The little room where Patrick and I used to celebrate our anniversary every year, the one with the green velvet banquette. The first voice was a man's. Calm, smooth, the kind of voice you'd want reading you the weather. The placement at Cedarbrook is locked in, October 15th. Once she signs the durable power of attorney at the party, we have a clear runway. 45 days minimum before anyone outside the family even notices she's gone. I knew that voice. That voice had told me my husband had heart failure. That voice had held my hand at Patrick's bedside and said, "Birdie, he's not in pain anymore." That voice belonged to my son's father-in-law, Dr. Bance Holloway, Patrick's cardiologist, the man who'd cried at Patrick's funeral. A second voice, a woman, younger. She still thinks the document is just for the house refinance. She hasn't read past page 3. That was my daughter-in-law, Margot. And then a third voice. A man's voice. My son's voice. "She trusts me," he said. "She'll sign whatever I put in front of her. She always has. I am going to tell you something. I have given birth to one child in my life. I carried him for 9 months and 2 weeks. I labored with him for 26 hours. I nursed him until he was almost 2 because he refused a bottle. I held his hand the day his father died. And in that pantry, with my back against a shelf of canned tomatoes, I heard him say I would sign whatever he put in front of me, and I felt something in my chest just stop, not break, stop. Like a clock that had been ticking for 68 years and somebody finally yanked the pendulum. Imogene's hand found my wrist in the dark. She didn't say anything. She just held on. They kept talking. Numbers. Bank account routing. Something called the Patrick H. Lassiter Foundation, the scholarship trust Patrick and I had set up after his sister died of leukemia in 1997. There was a little over $9 million in that trust. The house was paid for, worth about 2.5. The brokerage. Patrick had been careful. Patrick had been so careful, was around $22 million. And the property in Beaufort, the one Patrick wanted Bea to have someday, that was another 4. Roughly $37 million. That's what they were carving up in the back room of a tea shop on a Wednesday afternoon while I was supposed to be picking up a dessert tray. Vance, Dr. Cho, Holloway, said something about an MMSE score. Mini mental state examination. He said he'd already written the preliminary notes. He said the second evaluation would happen the Monday after the party. He said he'd been observing concerning patterns since spring. Spring. I thought back to spring, to the time my son told me, very gently, that I had asked him the same question about his work trip twice in one phone call, to the time Margot, my daughter-in-law, had said in front of company, "Oh, Bertie's been forgetting little things lately, haven't you, Bertie?" And I had laughed because what else do you do? I hadn't been forgetting. I had been being told I was forgetting. A chair scraped. Someone stood up. Footsteps. The front bell rang. The voices were gone. Imogene turned the light back on. Her eyes were wet. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "I've heard them 3 times. 3 different Wednesdays. I didn't know what to do. I didn't know if you'd believe me without." "How long?" I said. "Since the end of April." I nodded. My voice came out very flat. "I came in for the dessert tray, Jeannie." She blinked at me. Then she went and got the dessert tray. I paid in cash. I tipped 20% like I always do. I walked out into the September afternoon and I drove the 4 miles home, and I sat in my driveway with the engine running for 45 minutes before I could make my hand turn the key off. My granddaughter Bea was coming over at 4. Bea is 14. Bea is the only person in my life right now I am sure of. I will tell you, in those 45 minutes in the driveway, I did not cry. I did not call anyone. I sat there and I did something I have not done since the week Patrick died. I made a list in my head, not of what I'd lost, of what I had. I had Imogene. I had a lawyer named Constance Reyna who'd handled Patrick's estate and who owed me nothing but respect. I had Patrick's old college friend Doyle, who'd retired 3 years ago from a 30-year career as a forensic accountant. I had a cleaning lady named Maricela who had been in my house every Tuesday and Friday for 11 years and who notices everything. And I had Bea. I also had 46 hours until Saturday night when my son and his wife and his father-in-law expected me to sit down at a long table at the Grove Park Inn, smile through the toasts, and sign whatever cream-colored folder Margot slid in front of me. I turned off the engine. I went inside. I put the dessert tray in the second refrigerator in the garage. And then I went into Patrick's old office, and I shut the door, and I picked up the landline. Patrick had insisted on keeping a landline. He said cell phones were for people who liked being interrupted, and I called Constance Reyna's private line. She answered on the second ring. "Connie," I said, "I need to come down to your office tonight." "Tonight, Connie. And I need you to call a man named Doyle Pritchard for me before I get there." There was a pause. "Bertie, what happened?" I told her. I sat in Patrick's leather chair in Patrick's office, surrounded by Patrick's books, and I told her everything I'd heard in the pantry. When I finished, she didn't say anything for a long time. Then she said, "How long do we have?" 46 hours. "The party is Saturday at 7. You drive carefully, don't speed, don't get pulled over. I don't want anything in a police report that puts you anywhere unusual tonight. I'll have Doyle here when you arrive." I hung up. I stood up. And I caught my reflection in the glass of the bookcase, and I almost didn't recognize the woman looking back at me. She looked older than I felt. She looked tired in a way I hadn't earned. Then I heard the front door open and Bea call out, "Gran!" I let myself in, and I straightened my spine and I fixed my face and I went out to my granddaughter, my son's daughter, and I hugged her like the world wasn't on fire. Let me tell you about my son because you need to understand. His name is Drew. He was born in 1984. I was 31. Patrick was 34. We had been trying for 6 years. I had 2 miscarriages before him. When he came out of me, he was screaming and red, and Patrick cried so hard the nurse made him sit down. Drew was a sweet boy, quiet, bookish. He liked maps. He used to lie on the floor with the atlas open and trace highways with his finger and tell me about the cities he was going to live in someday. He had Patrick's dark eyes in my mouth. He played soccer because his father loved soccer, but he was always better at the chess club. When Patrick died, Drew was 27. He was already working for the company. Patrick founded a specialty insurance firm in 1989, Lassiter & Quinn, underwriting for boutique hotels and historic properties. Drew had come on as a junior analyst at 23. When Patrick died, Drew was a senior associate. The natural thing would have been to make him president. Patrick had even told me, in the hospital, "Bertie, when the time comes, give him the chair. He's ready." I didn't. I gave the presidency to a woman named Hollis, Patrick's chief of operations for 15 years. I made Drew chief financial officer. I told him he'd run it someday. He just needed 5 more years. I told myself it was about competence. The truth I didn't admit even to myself until this past Wednesday in a driveway with the engine running, is that I didn't trust him to carry what Patrick built. He was too soft. He was too easily led. He'd been led his whole life. First by his father, then by me, and after Patrick died, by whoever was loudest in the room. Drew never forgave me. He smiled and he showed up to work and he handled the numbers. But I could feel it. The thing under the smile. He met Margot in 2018. She was 34. She worked in private wealth advisory at a regional bank up in Charlotte. She was beautiful in that careful, expensive way, the kind of woman whose handbag costs more than my first car. She came to dinner at the house and asked sharp, polite questions about the foundation, about the trust structure, about how Patrick had organized the holdings. I thought she was being thoughtful. I thought she was being to know us. Her father is Vance Holloway. He'd been Patrick's cardiologist since 2003. After Patrick died, he stayed my doctor too, even though I'm healthy as a horse, and only saw him once a year for a checkup. He was a friend. He gave the eulogy at Patrick's funeral. He cried. Drew and Margot got married in 2020. Small wedding, the COVID kind. Bea was born in 2010. Drew had her with his first wife, a lovely woman named Teresa, who died of an aggressive pancreatic cancer in 2017. Bea has been my heart ever since. She lives with Drew and Margot, but she's at my house 3 or 4 days a week. She does her homework at the kitchen island. She tells me about her friends. She is the reason any of this is going to be worth it. Now. The party Saturday, the promotion party, was officially to celebrate Drew finally being made president of Lassiter & Quinn. I had announced his promotion in August. Hollis was retiring in November. After 13 years, I was finally giving Drew the chair Patrick had wanted him to have. He'd be president. I'd remain on the board as chairwoman, mostly ceremonial. He'd run the business. It had felt to me like the right thing, a long overdue gift. I'd told myself finally, you can let go a little. I'd had no idea that letting go a little wasn't enough for them. They wanted all of it. And the only way to get all of it was to declare me incompetent. That night, I drove down to Constance's office in the South Sloat district. Doyle Pritchard was already there. I hadn't seen him in maybe 4 years. He'd put on a little weight and lost most of his hair. But his eyes were the same. Flat, kind, watchful. The eyes of a man who'd spent 30 years finding money other people had tried to hide. Constance had already pulled up the foundation paperwork. She had a clean yellow legal pad. She wrote down everything I told her. When I got to Vance Holloway's part, the planned MMSE, the second evaluation, the placement at Cedarbrook, Doyle looked up sharply. Cedarbrook, he said. Up near Black Mountain? The memory care place? That's the one. He set his pen down. Bertie, I need you to know something. I've seen Cedarbrook in 3 cases in my career. Every time the patient was placed there inside 90 days of a power of attorney transfer. 2 of those 3 patients were dead within a year. The room got very quiet. Who owns it? I asked. A holding company in Delaware. Took me 6 weeks to trace it the first time I tried. There's a doctor whose name keeps coming up on the admitting paperwork. Vance Holloway. Doyle nodded. I never had enough to prove anything. The families never came forward. They didn't want the scandal. I looked at Constance. Constance looked at me. I want to know everything, I said. I want to know if this is the first time or if he's done it before. I want to know about Margot's bank work. She's been in private wealth advisory for 10 years. She would know how to move money. I want to know if my son is the architect or the puppet. And I have 45 hours. Doyle picked his pen back up. He smiled, but it wasn't a happy smile. It was the smile of a man who had been waiting a long time to be asked. I can get you most of it by Friday night, he said. Maybe all of it. Bertie, are you sure you want all of it? Some things, once you know them, you can't unknow. I thought of Drew at 5, lying on the rug with the atlas. I thought of the way his hair smelled when he was a baby. Tell me everything, I said. By Thursday at noon, Doyle had Vance Holloway's bank records. Don't ask me how, I didn't ask. And he had a pattern. 3 previous patients in the last 11 years, all wealthy widows between 66 and 79. All diagnosed with cognitive decline by Vance. All admitted to Cedarbrook within 6 months of the diagnosis. 2 had died. The third, a woman named Roselle Tibbetts up in Hendersonville, was still alive, but her grandson had liquidated her estate and moved to Belize. Vance had received payments, not large ones, between $35,000 and $70,000 per case, routed through a shell company called Blue Ridge Consultative Health. Constance pulled the corporate filings. Margot Holloway Lassiter was listed as the registered agent. She'd been the registered agent since 2017. 3 years before she married Drew. 3 years before she married my son, my daughter-in-law had been administering a shell company that paid her father for falsified dementia diagnoses on rich widows. She didn't fall in love with Drew. She targeted him. I don't know how to describe what that did to me. It wasn't grief, exactly. Grief is when you lose something. This was when you find out something you loved had never quite been there. By Thursday night, Doyle had something else. He had Drew's gambling. Not casino gambling. Worse, Drew had been quietly hemorrhaging money on private equity bets, high-risk hotel ventures, a failed boutique resort in Tulum, a yacht charter business in St. Lucia that turned out to be a Ponzi feeder. He'd lost a little over $4 million of his own money over 6 years. Lassiter and Quinn paid him well, but not $4 million well. He'd been borrowing. Against his house, against his brokerage, against Bea's College Trust. Bea's College Trust, the one I'd opened the day she was born. He drained it down to $12,000. $12,000. I'd put in $160 over the years. Doyle slid the printout across the table. She didn't make him do that, Bertie. He started before he met her. She just found him. She found the bleeding and she came in with a tourniquet and a knife. I sat with that. Constance poured me a glass of water I didn't drink. I said, I want to do this at the party. Constance said, Bertie, we can stop the power of attorney quietly. We can move accounts. We can freeze the foundation. We can have him quietly removed from the presidency on Monday. We don't have to. At the party, I said. Every person who matters in this town is going to be in that room. Vance's medical license, his reputation, Margot's banking license, they all live or die in front of those people. If I do this quietly, Vance walks away and finds another widow. Margot walks away and finds another grieving man. They've already done it 3 times. I will not let there be a 5th. Doyle nodded slowly. And Drew? I closed my eyes. Drew is my son, I said. Drew is going to have to decide who he wants to be on Saturday night. And I'm going to give him that choice in front of every person whose opinion he's ever cared about. He can stand with them or he can stand with himself. But I'm done choosing for him. I've been choosing for him his whole life. Friday, I spent at my house. Maricela came in to clean as usual, and I asked her to sit down at the kitchen table, and I told her what was happening. She crossed herself. She said, Mrs. Birdie, 2 weeks ago, Mr. Drew and Miss Margot, they were in the office. I was dusting in the hall. She said to him, once your mother is in Cedarbrook, you cannot visit for the first 60 days. The doctor said, it's for her stabilization. He said, I know. He sounded, she searched for the word tired, not happy, tired. Why didn't you tell me, Maricela? She started to cry. I thought maybe I heard wrong. I thought, Mrs. Birdie, he is your son. I thought if I was wrong, you would never forgive me. I prayed about it. I'm sorry. I held her hand across the table. I told her she had nothing to be sorry for. I told her that on Saturday night after the party, she was getting a check and she was going to take a long vacation, and when she came back, this house would still be here. That afternoon, Bea came over. She did her algebra at the island. She told me about a boy in her grade who'd asked her to the homecoming dance and how she didn't really want to go, but didn't want to be rude. I listened. I made her a grilled cheese with the sharp white cheddar she likes. I watched her 14-year-old hands hold the sandwich, and I thought, you are why I'm doing this. Because you have a college trust to fill back up. Because you have a stone house to inherit. Because you deserve a father who chose right when it was hard. I didn't tell her. I won't ever tell her the details. She doesn't need them. Saturday came in gray and cool. I dressed at 5. I wore a midnight blue dress Patrick had bought me in Charleston in 2008. I put on the pearls he'd given me for our 25th. I looked at myself in the long mirror and I said out loud, Patrick, I am going to do something tonight that will break our boy. Forgive me, or don't, but I have to. The Grove Park Inn ballroom was full by 6:45. 130 people. Board members. Clients. Old friends. The mayor. 2 state senators. Hollis was there. She'd flown back from her daughter's place in Oregon for it. Vance was there in a dark suit. He hugged me when I arrived. He said, Birdie, you look beautiful. He kissed my cheek. Margot was wearing white. White at a corporate event. I almost laughed. Drew was at the bar. He saw me. He came over. He kissed the top of my head the way Patrick used to do. Mom, he said, thank you for this. Thank you for everything. His eyes were wet. He meant it. That was the worst part. He meant it. At 7, dinner was served. At 8, the toasts began. Hollis went first. She talked about Patrick. She talked about me. She talked about the company. She talked about the company. She talked about Drew, about watching him grow up in the firm, about her confidence in his leadership. She raised a glass. Then it was my turn. I walked up to the small stage. I had not brought notes. Behind me, Doyle had quietly set up a projector. Constance was at table 3. 2 men I had never met, friends of Doyle's, retired federal agents, were at tables 9 and 14. A young woman from the state attorney general's elder fraud unit was at table 6, in a black dress, holding a glass of wine she had not touched. I took the microphone. Thank you all for being here tonight, I said. My voice came out steady. 41 years ago, Patrick and I started this company in a one-room office above a hardware store on Lexington Avenue. We had a typewriter, a phone, and $400 in the operating account. Patrick used to say we built this company one good handshake at a time. I looked out at the room. People were smiling. Drew was at the family table, beaming. Tonight, we're here to celebrate my son becoming president of Lassiter and Quinn, a position his father always wanted him to hold. A little applause. Marriage and family and business, I said, are all built on the same thing. Trust. You cannot run $100 million insurance company on contracts alone. You run it on trust. You cannot raise a child on rules alone. You raise them on trust. The room was very quiet now. 3 days ago, I said, I walked into the back pantry of a tea shop I have been going to since 1988. The owner, a woman who has known my family for 40 years, locked the door behind me and asked me to listen through a wall. Vance Holloway set his fork down very carefully. What I heard in that pantry was a plan to declare me mentally incompetent at this party tonight, to place me, by October 15th, in a memory care facility called Cedarbrook, to transfer roughly $37 million of assets, including the Patrick H. Hens Lassiter Foundation, the scholarship trust we built in memory of Patrick's sister, into the control of 3 people. The room had gone still in a way I have never heard a room go still. I turned. The screen behind me lit up. The first slide was a corporate filing for Blue Ridge Consultative Health. Vance Holloway's name. Margot Holloway Lassiter's name as registered agent. Date of incorporation, 2014. I said, Dr. Teaver. Vance Holloway, my late husband's cardiologist and my own physician for 23 years, has falsified cognitive impairment diagnoses on 3 previous patients. 2 of them are dead. 1 is alive in name only. Her estate was emptied and her family disappeared. I have the medical records. I have the bank trails. I have a victim's family ready to testify. The slide changed. 3 names, 3 photographs, 3 dates of death. Vance stood up, halfway up. One of the men at table 9, Doyle's friend, was already at his elbow. Dr. Tara Holloway, I said into the microphone, please sit down. He sat. The slide changed again. Margot's photograph, her registered agent paperwork, the list of wire transfers from Blue Ridge to Vance. Margot Holloway Lassiter, I said, has been the registered agent of this shell company since 2017, 3 years before she married my son. Her job in private wealth advisory gave her access to the financial profiles of vulnerable widows. She did not fall in love with my son. She identified him. Margot was very still. Her face was the color of paper. The slide changed. Drew's photograph. His private equity losses, a line that read $4,200,000, and then a column with Baez College Trust, the original balance, the current balance. The room made a sound, a low, ugly collective sound, the sound of 130 people understanding something at the same time. I looked at my son. He was staring at the screen. His hands were flat on the white tablecloth. He was not breathing. Drew, I said. Just his name. Into the microphone. In front of all of them. He looked up at me. You drained your daughter's college trust, I said. $158,000. To pay debts you ran up before you ever met the woman sitting next to you. I don't know when she found you. I don't know when she convinced you that the answer to your problems was to put your mother in a building until she died. But I know this. I know that you sat across from me at Sunday dinner 3 weeks ago, and you held my hand, and you told me you loved me. And I know that on Wednesday afternoon, in a back room at a tea shop, you said I would sign whatever you put in front of me. I let that sit. You were right, I said. Until this Wednesday I would have. The screen changed one more time. The document, the durable power of attorney, the signature line, blank. Waiting. I am not signing this tonight, I said. I am not signing it ever. The Patrick H. Lassiter Foundation is, as of 9 o'clock tonight, in an irrevocable trust administered by an outside fiduciary. The brokerage accounts have been frozen since Friday morning. The presidency of Lassiter and Quinn, effective immediately, returns to Hollis on an interim basis until the board can convene next Tuesday. I looked at Vance Holloway. Dr. Holloway, there is a member of the state attorney general's office in this room. There are also 2 retired federal agents at tables 9 and 14. You are welcome to finish your dinner. You will be arrested in the parking lot. I looked at Margot. Your banking license is, as of Monday, the subject of a formal complaint to the State Regulatory Commission. The wire transfer evidence will be in their hands by noon. And then I looked at my son. I looked at him for a long time. Drew, I said, you are not being arrested tonight. The forensic evidence on your involvement is, for now, circumstantial. You drained Bea's trust, which is theft from a minor, but I am her grandmother and I will not press it. You will resign from Lassiter and Quinn in writing by Monday morning. You will enter inpatient treatment for gambling at a facility your father once supported financially. You will not see your daughter unsupervised until a family court tells me you can. You will not contact me, except through your lawyer, until I decide you may. I lowered the microphone for 1 second. Just one. I had to. Then I raised it again. I gave you everything I had, I said. I just did not give you enough of myself. That is on me. The rest is on you. I set the microphone down. Vance Holloway was arrested in the parking lot at 9:22. Margot was served papers the following Tuesday. The state attorney general's office filed charges against both of them within 30 days. Vance lost his license in February. Margot pled out to wire fraud and a regulatory violation. She served 14 months in a federal facility in West Virginia. The other 2 families came forward. Roselle Tibbetts' grandson was extradited back from Belize in April. Drew resigned on Monday. He went to a facility outside Asheville on the Wednesday after. He spent 90 days there. When he came home, he came to my front door. He did not come inside. He stood on the porch with his hands at his sides and he said, "Mama, I don't know how to start." I said, "Then don't start, just stand there. I'll stand here too." We stood there for I don't know how long. The September sun was on his shoulders. He was 41 years old and he looked like a child. That was 13 months ago. He has not run the company since. He has not asked to. He works as the operations manager for a community foundation grant program in Knoxville, 2.5 hours away. He drives in every other Sunday and he eats dinner with me and Bay at my kitchen island. He does not bring up the company. He does not bring up Margot. He does not bring up his father. Last month, on the anniversary of the party, he brought me a small bound notebook. Inside, in his handwriting, was every dollar he had stolen from Bea's college trust. He had been paying it back, $200 a week, every week, into a new account in her name. He had a quarter of the way to go. I did not cry in front of him. I waited until he left. Bea is 15 now. She is a sophomore. She still does her homework at my kitchen island 3 days a week. She knows some of what happened, not all. She knows her father is sick and getting better. She knows her step-grandfather is not in our lives. She knows her grandmother is okay. If you are still here with me, please leave a comment that says "still here" so I know you are. I read them. I do. And if you have a moment to tell me, honestly, what you would have done if you were the one in that pantry on Wednesday afternoon, I want to hear it. Would you have stood up in front of everyone? Would you have done it quietly? Would you have been able to do it at all? I want to say one more thing before I let you go tonight. I have thought about this for 13 months, about what the cracks were and who put them there, and how a son of mine could ever sit at a table and plan to bury me alive in a building outside Black Mountain. The cracks were not all his. I put some of them there myself. I gave him a father he could never live up to. I gave him an inheritance he was supposed to grow into, and I never let him grow into it. I gave him a job and not the chair. I gave him love, but not respect. And I gave him those things because I was scared. I was scared of losing what Patrick built. I was scared, after Patrick died, of being alone with my own decisions, so I held on. And the harder I held on, the smaller my son got. And by the time he was a small enough man to fit into Margot's hand, I had done half of her work for her. That is the truth I have to live with. The other truth, the easier one, is that on a Wednesday afternoon in September, a tea shop owner in a town I have lived in for 40 years saved my life by pulling me into a pantry. People will surprise you. The world is full of Imogines. Pay attention to who is paying attention to you. Thank you for sitting with me tonight. If this story meant something to you, leave it in the comments. Tell me where you're watching from, and take care of the people you love, not by holding on tighter, but by trusting them with the truth while you still can. Good night from a stone house on a hill in North Carolina. I'll see you next time. I've had 13 months to sit with what happened in that pantry, and at this kitchen island, and on that stage at the Grove Park Inn. And the thing I keep coming back to, the thing I want to leave with you tonight, is that almost nothing in my life broke the way I thought it would. I thought betrayal would come from a stranger. It came from the boy I nursed for 2 years. I thought wisdom was something you earned by living long enough. I learned at 68 that I had been getting one thing catastrophically wrong since 2011, and no amount of birthdays had shown it to me. What showed it to me was a tea shop owner with shaking hands and 46 hours of silence. Here is what I believe now, and I believe it because I paid for it. Every choice you make plants something. Patrick built a company with handshakes, and that company outlived him by 14 years. Vance Holloway built his career on lies that's small enough to overlook, and one Wednesday in September, those lies caught up to him in a parking lot outside a hotel. Margot built a marriage on a spreadsheet, and the spreadsheet is what convicted her. Drew built his manhood on his father's shadow and his mother's grip, and when a woman came along with a knife and a tourniquet, he had no spine of his own to refuse her. None of that was random. None of it was bad luck. We all planted what grew. I planted some of it too. When I gave my son a job instead of the chair, I told myself it was prudence. It was fear. When I called him soft, I told myself it was honesty. It was contempt I had not earned the right to feel. The crack Margot walked through, I helped open. That is the hardest thing I have ever written down, but it is true, and if I don't tell you the true part, none of the rest of this story is worth anything. What I want to give you tonight is 3 small things. Be honest, even when honesty costs you the comfortable version of someone you love. Be patient enough to learn before you act. I had 46 hours and I used every one of them because the worst thing I could have done that Wednesday was walk back into that shop and start yelling. And be willing to stand up in a room full of people you've known for 40 years and say the thing that is going to ruin the night. Decency is not the same as quiet. If you raise children, raise them with respect, not just with love. Love without respect is a leash, and a leash makes a small person, and a small person is easy to lead anywhere. Bia is 15. Her trust is being rebuilt. $200 at a time by the man who emptied it. That is the only ending I was ever going to be able to live with. Not revenge. Not even justice. Just a son on a porch in the September sun, learning how to start. Thank you for sitting with me. Take care of the Imogines in your life. They are everywhere if you look.